The plastic chair was cold and unyielding against my back, a stark contrast to the stifling, antiseptic air of the doctor's waiting room. It was a place of muted fears and quiet desperation where people avoided each other's eyes, lost in their private battles with mortality. I was one of them, a new recruit to this army of the afflicted, still learning the language of symptoms and the etiquette of anxiety. My file, I knew, contained the words "recent widow," a label that invited pitying glances and soft, careful voices. When my phone vibrated in my purse, the sound was jarring, a small, insistent life in that room of suspended animation. A flicker of warmth, foolish and fleeting, ignited in my chest. It was Angela, my only daughter, my only child. I answered, my "hello, sweetheart," already halfway out of my mouth. But the voice that came back was not my daughter's. It was a stranger's, carved from ice and clipped with an impatience that felt like a physical slap. "Mom, we're going on a trip to Europe tomorrow." I blinked, the fluorescent light suddenly too bright. "Europe? That's sudden, Angela. For how long?" There was a pause, a beat of silence where I could almost hear her gathering the weapons she'd prepared. "I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." The line went dead. The words didn't just hang in the air. They seeped into me, a slow-acting poison. Sold your beach house, sold your car, buy. Each syllable was a shard of glass, shredding the fabric of my reality. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the linoleum floor. I didn't move to retrieve it. I couldn't. The world had shrunk to the space between one breath and the next. 45 years, I counted them, the years falling away like pages torn from a book. 45 years of rocking her through fevers, of bandaging scraped knees, of sitting through endless school recitals. 45 years of saving for her college, of worrying over her first heartbreak, of welcoming a son-in-law I never trusted. Sacrifices made not with resentment, but with the quiet certainty of a mother's love. And she had discarded me, not with anger, not with a fight, but with a cold, transactional finality, like garbage, like something to be taken out and disposed of because it was no longer convenient. A tremor started deep inside me, a seismic shift of pain and betrayal. But then, something else rose to meet it, a strange, defiant calm. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and I smiled. It was not a smile of joy, but of revelation. There was something my dear, cruel daughter didn't know. My name is Antonia Brooks. I'm 71 years old, and until that very moment, I thought I knew the woman I had raised. My mind flew back 6 months through the fog of grief to the morning that split my life in two. Robert. My Robert. We were at the breakfast table, the one we'd shared for 45 years. The morning sun streamed through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. He had just poured my coffee, a splash of cream, just so. He toasted the bread the way I liked it, golden brown. He leaned over. His familiar scent of soap and peppermint enveloped me and pressed his lips to my forehead. "Good morning, my love," he'd murmured. Those were his last words. A moment later, his hand went to his chest, a look of faint surprise on his dear face, and then he was gone. The silence he left behind was the loudest sound I had ever heard. In the wreckage of that silence, Angela had appeared. She became a constant presence, or so I had believed in my shattered state. She came over 3 times a week, a whirlwind of efficiency. She handled the funeral arrangements with a cool competence that I, in my numbness, had mistaken for strength. She accompanied me to the grocery store, her arm linked through mine, a steadying force. And it was she who had insisted persistently on this doctor's appointment. "Mom, you need to take better care of yourself now that you're alone," she'd say, her smile a practiced curve of her lips. I had looked at that smile and seen love. Now I understood it was the smile of a project manager assessing an asset, a final box to be ticked before liquidation. The beach house. The thought of it was a fresh wound. Robert and I had bought it when Angela was 15. It wasn't just a purchase, it was a promise. We'd scrimped and saved for years, foregoing new clothes, modest vacations, pouring every extra cent into that dream by the sea. It was a small, cream-colored cottage with a porch that looked directly onto the ocean. Every summer, we'd pilgrimage there, our car packed to the brim. We built memories like sandcastles, each one precious and temporary. Birthday parties with homemade cakes, Christmases with a small tinsel-draped tree, the sound of the waves our constant carol. Angela grew up within those sun-bleached walls. She brought her first boyfriend there, a shy boy named Michael who Robert grilled hot dogs for. Later, she brought Edward, with his slick smile and eyes that never quite met yours. Even then, I had cooked for everyone, cleaned up after them, done the laundry, happy just to have my family under one roof. It was our tradition, the bedrock of our family. I never, for a single second, thought she would see it as a line item on a balance sheet. Just money. And the car, that old Ford pickup truck, it was Robert's pride and joy. He wasn't a man of many hobbies, but caring for that truck was his meditation. Every Sunday, without fail, he would wash it, the soap suds clinging to his arms. He changed the oil with religious devotion, his hands moving with a quiet expertise. He always parked it in the same spot, under the shade of the old oak tree to protect its fading paint from the sun. Angela knew what that truck meant to me. It wasn't transportation. It was a relic. It was the last thing I had left that still held his scent. A faint mix of engine oil, Old Spice, and the peppermints he always carried. She had sold his ghost for pocket money. When the nurse finally called my name, my legs felt like wood. I moved through the examination in a daze. The doctor, a kind-faced man with tired eyes, pronounced me in remarkably good health for my age. "Just make sure to rest, Mrs. Brooks. Eat well. Grief takes a physical toll." I nodded, a perfect picture of docile agreement, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, locked on a manila envelope and the glacial coldness in my daughter's voice. I walked out of the office, the automatic doors swishing shut behind me, and made my way to the bus stop. According to Angela, I no longer had a car. The reality of her theft was now a practical inconvenience. But as I stood there watching the traffic flow past, a small, grim smile touched my lips again. There was something poetic, almost beautiful in the sheer cruelty of it. My daughter believed she had left me with nothing, penniless, carless, and soon to be homeless. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom, was that Robert, my brilliant, quiet Robert, had always been a man who planned for every storm. He had built an ark, and she had just thrown herself overboard. The bus arrived with a sigh of hydraulic brakes. I found a seat by the window, the world passing by in a blur of anonymous houses and bustling stores. I saw people rushing, their faces etched with their own private worries, their own secret tragedies. I had mine too, and I was finally on my way home to discover the full extent of them. The house was silent when I entered, the silence of a place that has lost its heart. I didn't stop to take off my coat. I went straight to our bedroom,
to the heavy oak dresser that had stood sentinel for decades. My hands, which had trembled in the doctor's office, were now steady. I opened the top drawer, the one that held my sweaters, and pushed them aside. And there it was, the manila envelope, exactly where I had left it, forgotten in the cataclysmic shock of loss.
I carried it to the bed, the same bed where Robert and I had slept, dreamed, and whispered our secrets for a lifetime. I sat on the edge, the familiar dip of the mattress a hollow comfort. The room was growing dark, the familiar evening shadows pooling in the corners. These were the shadows that had terrified me in the first months after his death, symbols of his permanent absence. Now they felt like a cloak. I was no longer afraid. With deliberate slowness, I untucked the flap of the envelope. It was like unwrapping a gift from beyond the grave. The contents whispered as I pulled them out. There were several documents, thick with legal jargon, and a single sheet of paper covered in Robert's neat, precise handwriting. My name was written on the front. For my Antonia. Tears, the first real tears since her phone call, filled my eyes, blurring the familiar script. I blinked them away, desperate to see. My dear Antonia, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for not telling you everything while I was alive, but you have such a warm and trusting heart, and I never wanted you to lie awake worrying about money. The truth is, over the years, I invested nearly all of our savings. We don't just have the beach house, my love. We own 6 other properties, including the entire apartment building where Angela and Edward live. We also have substantial shares in 3 companies that are worth more than you can possibly imagine. You are rich, Antonia. You always were rich in all the ways that matter, but now you are on paper, too. You never have to worry again. My breath hitched. I shuffled through the other papers. Deeds to houses in neighborhoods I knew. A sleek downtown condo, a quaint motel on the coast, and yes, the deed for the towering 20-story apartment building that housed my daughter's luxurious home. Robert had been the silent owner for a decade. Everything held in the name of a company, Brooks Investments, Inc. According to the documents spread before me, I was the sole heir, the sole beneficiary. There were bank statements, too, for accounts I never knew existed. The numbers had so many zeros, they seemed like a fantasy, a dream of avarice. Robert had been a bus driver for 40 years, a humble man who took pride in his work. But apparently, he had also been a financial savant, a quiet genius who had taken every penny we scrimped, every sacrifice we made, and multiplied it in the shadows. He had done it all for me, for us. His letter continued, and the next paragraph made my heart clench with its painful prescience. You know our daughter, Antonia. She has a good heart, but it is a fragile one, easily swayed by the glitter of things. If she knew we had this kind of wealth, her attitude would change. Edward would fill her head with grand ideas. I wanted her to love us for who we are, not for what we have. I wanted to protect what was real.
The irony was so profound, it was dizzying. Our daughter had discarded us, believing we were a financial burden, when in reality, we were the silent foundation of the very life of luxury she so coveted. She had sold my memories to fund a fantasy, not knowing the fantasy was already hers. Sleep was impossible that night. I wandered the house, a ghost in my own life. I ran my fingers over the worn fabric of the armchair where Robert always sat, the one Angela had called tacky and urged me to replace. I looked at the knickknacks on the mantelpiece, a ceramic dove we bought on our honeymoon, a seashell Angela found when she was 7, all the outdated treasures she had scoffed at. My eyes fell on the gallery of family photos lining the hallway, and there she was, at 5 years old, sitting on Robert's lap, her head thrown back in a peal of unrestrained laughter, her small hands clutching his shirt. Where did that little girl go? When did her laughter become calculated, her smiles become tools? When did my Angela become this cold, strategic stranger? The next morning, the phone rang early, shattering the fragile peace. It was Angela again. Her voice was different, layered with a false warmth that set my teeth on edge. "Mom, how are you? I wanted to let you know we transferred the money from the house and the car. We deposited your share into your account. It's not much, but it should help you live for a few months while you look for something smaller." I gripped the receiver, my knuckles white. "My share?" I asked, keeping my voice a placid lake, betraying none of the storm beneath. "Yes, Mom," she said, a hint of exasperation seeping through. "We obviously weren't going to leave you with nothing. We gave you 30%. That's fair, right? We need the bulk of it for our investment in Europe. Edward has an incredible business opportunity over there." 30%. She had stolen 100% of my history and was now magnanimously returning a fraction of its monetary value. The audacity was breathtaking. "I see," I said, my voice still calm. "And when do you leave?" "This afternoon. Our bags are already packed. We'll be gone for at least 6 months, maybe more if the business goes well. But don't worry, Mom. When we get back, we'll help you find a small apartment, something that fits your needs." Fits my needs. As if she, who had just amputated me from my own life, had any conception of what my needs were. "Okay, Angela," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Have a safe trip." "Oh, Mom!" The relief in her voice was a physical blow. "I knew you'd understand. You've always been so compassionate. We love you so much." The click of the disconnect was the period at the end of our relationship. I stood there, the dead phone in my hand, and for the first time since Robert's death, I laughed. It was a raw, broken sound that echoed in the quiet kitchen, a laugh that was closer to a sob. The situation was so grotesquely absurd, it had crossed into the realm of black comedy. My daughter had committed grand larceny against her own mother, spoken to me with condescension that curdled the air, and all to fund a European adventure that was undoubtedly built on Edward's lies. I logged into my bank account. The numbers confirmed it. They had deposited a sum that was an insult, a pittance. A quick search of property records showed they had sold the beach house for far less than its market value, a fire sale to get quick cash. And Robert's truck, his beloved Ford, had been sold for a song. But the money wasn't the deepest cut. It was the chilling ease of her betrayal. 45 years of my life, of unconditional love, had been erased with a 2-minute phone call? That was the wound that would never fully heal. That afternoon, I stood at my living room window, hidden by the curtain. I watched as a taxi pulled up. Edward emerged first, his posture arrogant as he loaded 2 enormous, expensive-looking suitcases into the trunk. Then came Angela, carrying a designer carry-on, her face alight with excitement. They looked like characters from a movie, young and beautiful and embarking on a grand adventure. They laughed, they kissed, they pointed down the street, no doubt making plans for their new life. They never once looked up at my window. They never waved goodbye. They simply got in the cab and drove away, leaving me and my old life in their dust. As the taillights disappeared around the corner, I turned from the window. The silence in the house was no longer oppressive.
It was expectant. I went to the kitchen table, where Robert's documents lay spread out like a map to a new world. I had decisions to make. The path of least resistance was clear. Call a lawyer, unleash the legal hounds, reclaim my property, and have my daughter charged with fraud. It would be swift, brutal, and satisfying in the most primal way. But something held me back. A deeper, more patient instinct. A lesson needed to be taught, not just a punishment meted out. Revenge would be empty if it didn't come with revelation. She needed to understand the weight of what she had done, not just suffer the consequences. I needed to save my daughter, even from herself. I found the business card in Robert's desk, tucked away in a small wooden box. Mr. Peterson, Esquire. He had been at the funeral, a tall, dignified man who had pressed my hand and said, "If you ever need anything, Antonia, anything at all, do not hesitate to call." Well, I needed him now. "Mrs. Brooks," his voice was warm, professional. "It's good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing, Mr. Peterson," I said, "but I need to see you urgently. I found some documents from Robert that I don't quite understand." "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" "I'll be there." That night, for the first time in months, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. I didn't dream of Robert, but I felt his presence, a steady, approving force in the darkness, as if he were standing watch. The next morning, I dressed with a care I hadn't mustered since his death. I chose my wine-colored dress, the one Robert always said made me look elegant. I fixed my hair, applied a little lipstick, and looked in the mirror. The woman who looked back was not the broken widow of yesterday. Her eyes held a new light, a glint of steel. I saw a strength I had forgotten I possessed. Mr. Peterson's office was downtown, in an old building with marble floors that echoed my footsteps. He greeted me warmly, but when I laid the documents on his massive oak desk, his professional composure cracked. His eyes widened as he scanned the pages. "Mrs. Brooks," he breathed, looking up at me with something akin to awe. This is much more than I ever imagined. Robert was an exceptionally shrewd man." He shuffled through the deeds and statements. "Look, according to this, you are the owner of—" "I know what I own, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I've reviewed the documents. What I need to know is what I can do legally right now." He cleared his throat, adapting to this new, decisive version of me. "Well, the sale of the beach house was unequivocally illegal. Angela had no legal standing to sell a property that was solely in your name. We can get it back immediately. We can also proceed with criminal charges for fraud against your daughter and her husband." I met his gaze steadily. "No, Mr. Peterson, I don't want to press charges. Not yet. I want to do this another way. I want everything to remain a secret for now. Can you help me?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me with a curious respect. "Of course. You are my client. What is it you need?" "I need you to discreetly get my beach house back. Do whatever is necessary to nullify that fraudulent sale. And I need you to help me gain real, direct control of all my properties, especially the building where my daughter lives." "I understand," he nodded. "It will be a process that takes a few weeks, but it's completely feasible." "Perfect," I said. "And Mr. Peterson, no one is to know that I am behind any of this. For now, I am just a grieving widow." When I left his office, the city air felt different, charged with possibility. I walked through the streets, a solitary figure amidst the crowds, but for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I had a purpose. I had a plan. The following weeks were the strangest of my life. I lived a double existence.
To my neighbors, to the butcher, to Aurora, who lived next door, I was Antonia Brooks, the poor widow who had been cruelly abandoned by her only child. They spoke to me in hushed, pitying tones, offering casseroles and condolences. I accepted them all with a sad smile and downcast eyes, perfecting the role of the victim. But in the afternoons, behind the closed curtains of my home, I became someone else. I pored over Robert's documents until I understood every clause. I studied finance, learned about property management and corporate structures. I spoke with Mr. Peterson in hushed phone calls, orchestrating the silent reclamation of my life. I learned that Edward was deeply in debt and that he had taken out loans using the apartment as collateral, a fact that was about to become very problematic for him. Mr. Peterson was efficient. "Mrs. Brooks, good news," he said during one of our calls. "The sale of the beach house has been nullified. The buyers were refunded. They were innocent in all this. The house is yours again."
A wave of relief washed over me. One piece of my heart had been returned. "And the building?" I asked. "More complicated, but proceeding. You've always been the owner through the company, but we're restructuring so you have direct control. Another 2 weeks." The pieces were falling into place. Aurora became my unwitting spy, her network of neighborhood gossips providing a steady stream of information. "Antonia, dear," she said one day, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Did you hear? Edward is in terrible trouble with the bank. They're saying the apartment isn't his to borrow against. And apparently, Angela knew nothing. She's having to come back from Europe to sort this out." I feigned surprise. "Oh, my, what a mess." "And that's not all." She leaned in conspiratorially. "The word is, there was no business in Europe. Edward was just running from his debts here. He lied to her." It was all unfolding exactly as I had hoped. Angela's fairy tale was crumbling, and she was discovering the man she'd chosen over her own family was a fraud. True to Aurora's prediction, Mr. Peterson called soon after. "Mrs. Brooks, your daughter has returned. She landed this morning." "Alone?" "Alone?" "Yes. Edward remained in Europe. It seems there was a rather spectacular falling out." I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. "And the letter?" "It will be delivered to her apartment this afternoon." The first move in my endgame was made. I hung up the phone, my heart pounding not with nervousness, but with anticipation. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Angela, as predicted, reached out the next morning. Her voice on the phone was strained, desperate. Mom, I need to talk to you urgently." "Good morning, honey," I said, my tone deliberately light. "How was Europe?" "Mom, I don't have time for that," she snapped, the facade of calm shattering. "I got a letter, an eviction notice. I have 30 days to vacate my apartment. It must be a mistake, right? Do you know anything about this?" "An eviction notice?" I poured concern into my voice. "How strange. From whom?" "From some company I've never heard of. Robert Investments, Inc. Do you know that name?" My blood ran cold at the name, but my voice remained steady. "No, honey, I've never heard of it. Are you sure the letter is legitimate?" "That's what I need to find out. Mom, I need your help. I don't know what to do. Edward, he left me. In Europe. He ran off with some waitress, and now I come back to this. I don't understand what is happening." There it was, the full confession.
The house of cards had collapsed. "I'm so sorry, honey," I murmured. "Where are you now?" "I'm at the apartment, but I don't know for how long. Mom, can I come see you? I need to talk to someone. I don't have anyone else." The irony was so perfect, it was painful. Now that the man she betrayed me for had abandoned her, she remembered she had a mother. "Of course, honey," I said. "Come over whenever you want." "I'm on my way."
I prepared for her arrival like an actress for a pivotal scene. I changed into a simple, faded house dress, the uniform of the vulnerable. I practiced my expression in the mirror, worried, compassionate, slightly lost. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door. The woman standing on my porch was a ghost of the confident one who had left in a taxi weeks before. She had lost a worrying amount of weight. Her expensive clothes hung loosely on her frame, wrinkled and stained from travel. Her eyes were red raw and shadowed by deep purple bruises of exhaustion. For a fleeting second, I saw my little girl, the one who would run to me after a nightmare. "Mom," she whispered, and took a half-step forward as if to hug me, then stopped, the memory of her actions creating an invisible wall between us. "Come in, honey," I said softly, stepping aside. "Do you want some coffee?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had first read Robert's letter. She looked small and defeated in the chair, clutching her coffee mug like a lifeline. "Mom, I'm so sorry for the way I left," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I didn't treat you well." "It's in the past, Angela," I said, the lie smooth on my tongue. "No, it's not." She looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. "I treated you horribly. I said horrible things. And now," her voice broke, "now I have no one." I let the silence hang, allowing her to feel the full weight of her isolation. "What happened with Edward?" I prompted, gently. The story tumbled out then, a torrent of humiliation and pain. The other woman in Paris, the revelation that there was no business, only a web of lies and debt. The forged signatures on loans, the banks now pursuing her for hundreds of thousands of dollars. She was drowning, and she had finally turned to the shore she had so callously left. And on top of it all, this eviction notice. "Mom, I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have a job. I don't have anywhere to go." She looked at me, her eyes pleading, and then she asked the question I had been waiting for. "I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I find a job and can get a small place to live." After everything, after kicking me out of my own life, she now wanted to move back into the ruins she had created. She wanted the poor, defenseless widow to save her. I let the pause stretch for a beat too long, letting her squirm in her desperation. Then I softened my face into a mask of maternal compassion. "Of course, honey," I said, "this will always be your home." The relief that washed over her was so profound it was almost pitiable. "Really, Mom? After everything that happened? You are my daughter, Angela. That will never change." She stood up then, and this time she did hug me. It was a desperate, clinging embrace, the hug of a drowning woman. I hugged her back, my arms around her thin shoulders, but my heart was a fortress. There was no unconditional love in that embrace, only calculation and the steady, cold beat of my plan. The first act was over. The second was about to begin.